Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unfiltered Vet Discussions. We are glad that you joined myself, Kelly, today, Phil, Stacy, and David.
Oh, yeah.
We have our royal official wave now. I think we have co-opted the royal wave as the Unfiltered Vet Discussion wave. You can see more about our faces if you're on podcast with no visual at unfilteredvetdiscussion.com, as well as our social media platforms. Please come, like, and share. We'd love to have you follow us. So today we were kind of kicking the ball around for ideas about what we want to discuss. And we always try to come up with kind of a snappy title because that's just who we are in the room. And we couldn't today because we had so many different thoughts around communication, reaction to communication. Does the communication response meet the scenario that they're responding to? Where's the empathy? What's underneath the empathy? What's actually going on with people's lives? And how do we choose our responses? I mean, so there's just kind of a lot of mishmash there. And we also have individual stories about that we've had throughout the years where we've just sat back on our heels and gone, huh, this is really interesting. I need a moment because I don't want to add to the fire. I want to like diffuse the fire and make it a more positive situation. So kind of that's the big cauldron pot that we are stirring today, and we will see what comes out of it. But like Phil, you kind of started the whole thing saying, gosh, it was a really interesting day at work the other day. And it made you sit back. And Stacy, you were saying you had a moment where you heard a story that was personal to you, and you're just like, those were your choices, and we kind of all stop and think about it. So I'm going to open up the floor for the rest of you at this time. And nobody says the thing. That's awesome.
No. Well, Stacy had do you want to share the story about the choices?
Oh, okay. I
Does
will.
that feel right?
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's fine. So
Okay.
yesterday, my husband was telling me a story where he went on Monday, I guess it was the day of the inauguration, right? And I guess I point that out because I feel like people's tempers are like they're just holding it in, like they're just on the verge. Like a lot of people are so stressed out. So that this was our ultimate conclusion. But anyways, he's going to this roping. So a roping is where that you bring your horse and there's all these cows and you. I'm sure the cowboys listening to me are not going to like trying to describe this, but the cow runs down the arena. Some guy throws the rope around the horns. The other guy gets the heels. They stretch out the cow. You get a time. It's all for money. It's basically gambling with a horse and a cow. So, anyways, he goes to these little jackpots all the time, and he was going to one in this it's like a dirt field, right? There's an arena, there's trucks and trailers, and he was trying to find a parking place, so he drove his truck and trailer with his two horses all the way around looking for a space, and then went out in the field and turned around and came back. And he said this guy just ran up to his truck, like hoofing it over there with his fist in his hand in a fist. And Ellis rolled down the window. He's like, can I help you? And he goes, you need to slow the F down. And he's like, well, I don't feel like I was speeding. I mean, he's in a dirt lot with horses. He's not, and my husband's such a careful driver. If anything, he's on me all the time for going over the speed limit. He doesn't even go over the speed limit. So I'm like, well, that's not like you. He goes, right. He goes, I just told the guy I wasn't speeding. That's weird. You thought I was driving recklessly. He goes, my kids are playing out there and you need to be more careful. And he's like
Yeah.
I said, I don't think
Yeah.
I was doing anything wrong. And he's like, well, you were, and you're inconsiderate, and blah, blah, blah. And Ellis said, I had to make a tough choice there. I was either going to say, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm going to get out and kick your butt. And I'm like, wow, those were your choices? He's like, yeah, those were my choices. And had I been a younger man than I am now at 52, I tell you, I would have just got out and beat his ass. I'm like, I think that is like the weirdest response. He goes, well, I'm more mature now. So I just told him, I'm really sorry if he thought I was speeding, and I will try to do better. I'm like, wow, That's crazy. But it bothered him, right? That this guy just came at him for no, obviously. I mean, I don't think Ellis was speeding just knowing him, but anyways, that's the story. I thought it's
Yeah.
probably because this guy's just charged about something else. Like he's just, it doesn't even, his
Yeah.
approach doesn't even suit the situation.
Yeah, and you never
And that,
know the other person, what's going on in their world.
No,
And they, is this they're venting on you, even though it has nothing to do with you. It has
yeah,
to do what happened yesterday or 2 hours ago,
he just
but
found out his
you're
wife
faced with that.
cancer.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you just don't know.
It's hard to be
And
understanding when somebody's up in your grill.
Oh, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing is you really got to bring your A game when someone's coming at you and you don't feel like you did anything wrong or maybe not that wrong.
Well, and we talked about it before. I got this from a colleague of mine. Um, you have that. My reaction is, my response will be, and that difference. And can you be
Yeah.
aware that I'm reacting right now? Pause. What's my response? What do I want it to be instead of just a reaction?
Ooh, and
And
that pause.
yeah, and that pause, the all-powerful
That's
pause,
the tough
right?
part. Yep.
What's
Yeah.
it like in the clinic, Phil? Are you seeing this in the clinic?
Yeah, yeah. So Stacy, one of the things, if I can, I wanted to go back. One word that you used that really was like bing is you mentioned the story that the guy had to have had. And that's the thing, is we are by our nature, we are storytelling machines. Is that there's in positive psychology, they call us homo narrativus, like is that we're these, we tell these stories. But that's the thing, is that given if there's a perception that your husband was speeding, my children are playing, you don't respect or care about my children, you are an evil person. And that's where we get into this, is that that person, whether they were conscious of it or not, had a story about who they believed your husband was that validated going up and potentially doing a violent act.
Yeah.
And had I not told that story, and then the other thing is that when we tell these stories, they trigger the same emotional response, whether it's true or not, whether your husband was actually speeding or not. If I tell myself that, I'm gonna have the same emotional response, whether it's valid or not. And that's the similar thing. What do we see with clients? Is that we can see that sometimes, is that if we're in a stressful situation, money, emotions are high, those types of things, is that if that client then tells themselves a story, whether they're conscious of it or not, that now all I want is their money, that I don't care about their animal, it then justifies that anger, where it's just based in fear, is that why do I have the fear about these things? And the tough thing, and David, to your point, the tough thing is that first salvo of anger, because it's an evolutionary adaptation for me to meet your emotion, is can I sidestep that and go, okay, what's going on? And then can I ask why? I'm curious, why are you having that response? Or validating what's going on. And so anyway, I say this in this chair as I sit in my house, knowing what it is like, though, to be in an exam room, with an owner who says, you heartless SOB, you're going to charge me, I don't have that kind of money. Like, how could you, not that happens a lot, but still.
It does happen a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it happens like weekly, right? At least that some client comes unglued on someone at the hospital. Do you think?
Well, so I think it can, and I think it's, with training of how we prep, our teams with going into that, and giving them some, maybe a suit of armor or just some training and saying, so, we use the example of I'm going in to take radiographs. It's the first thing that I do. I'm going to put the lead on because I know that ionizing radiation is dangerous. I give a technician a $3,500 estimate for pancreatitis to go in and talk to this owner. I need to have given them tools to know that I've got a potential firestorm, in my hand when I go in there. And it's like, have I given my team the tools to be able to understand that it is not unlikely that person is going to have an instant emotional response, and how do we then give them the tools to deal with that? And so what I would say is that, at least in our practice, I'll say, is that we don't see that as much. And I don't think that people don't still have that emotional response, but we've just been intentional about trying to give our team the tools when they go into those situations.
Well, and you might not be seeing as much because you're there and you're such an advocate and a teacher and able to equip people. But, I guess it was like 2 years ago, my old clinic called me up, and the head doctor, and she's like, "Hey, can you come? Do you have any talks in your arsenal about angry clients?" I'm like, I can put something together. And she's like, we're getting beat up, and I've got a lot of new staff, and they're not equipped for this, and they're young. And she's like, I'm not sure I'm equipped to teach them and be their mentor. So I went in, I did a 2-hour talk. There was a lot of stories being told, and it became glaringly obvious that these people are actually not equipped to deal with this. Like they're young. A lot of them are like in their 20s. And they came up to me afterwards, and they're talking about, what do I do when I just want to burst into tears? Or how do I control my anger? Or how do I, function? And I think a lot of people quit because it's overwhelming. And I feel like that's the big thing is, how do you give them the tools? Like it's like we need to give them the tools, but what are they? How do you give them? And is it a one and done? No, it's like constant education for something like this. It's at least you should be spending, I would say, 25% of your monthly meeting time with your team talking about this at a minimum, because it's probably the number one reason for people leaving, for the negative work environment, the culture, and the burnout, like that right there. It's not the euthanasia. It's like, it's this whole anger side of the public.
I just want to chime in with the ADHD here is so the tool that so not to focus so much on what we've got, but we've created this tool for veterinary workplaces to evaluate, well-being and psychological safety in that. What's fascinating is the thing I thought it was going to be job demands, is going to be the thing that was going to show us the most correlation to burnout. And damn it, it's self-criticism. It's us is such a strong corollary to burnout, is again, homo narrativus. I'm not good enough. I deserve being, and that's where and this is where I'm with you 110%, Stacy, as far as, investing that time, but just saying you're spot on is that, the thinking can play a big part.
Well, especially because in human nature, we remember the negative. And so, the folks that conflict, because we don't like it, so it roots itself in our head. And I think, like Stacy, what you mentioned about staff meetings on a regular basis addressing this, what situation came up, how was it dealt with, what could we have done better, what can we learn from this? But at the same time, we need to reinforce the positive. And the folks that we met with that got that $3,500 invoice and said, yep, no problem, here you go, please do your best. The rewarding ones that happen, but we don't remember them because they get squashed down. And I think in the staff meetings, to bring those up and share those positive notes on the team to kind of counteract that self-criticism. I didn't do it right in that situation. Hey, we did do it right in this situation. Let's celebrate that and try and get that to squash down some of those negative ones.
Yeah.
But you need a safe environment.
Yeah.
Because
You do.
Yeah, this stuff is it's tough.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
hard
right.
because
Yeah.
that self-talk is a real deal. We all know that,
Yep.
right? And we all know where our worst, get on that bicycle and ride that one hard into the sunset, that it's all negative, negative versus positive. But if we don't allow a safe space for me to come up and be vulnerable in a staff meeting and say, hey guys, I'm beating myself up pretty hard right now about this. And I just need to talk about it. I need to talk it out, right? Be it on a one-to-one, be it in a room, if it's everybody's a safe space in a room. And I just like to get your take on it. Like, I just like to have a conversation about.
Yeah, that's like, I would say super unlikely that would happen in a staff meeting.
Right? Because those environments aren't there, because what people are more worried about, and rightly so, because it's been reinforced, is somebody's going to say something negative that reinforces what's already going through their head. They're like, oh, so therefore I was right. I did do.
Right. And did you try to say it this way, or did you say it that, like, just some little subtle critiques that make you feel worse? Where do people go these days? Like, if I'm a hospital out in Durango, Colorado, and I have, I'm Dr. Shannon and I've got my team, I care a lot about them, I'm willing to put the money out. Where do I go for help? What's that look like? I don't know the answer to this.
Right. Well, because it's hard to find it. One, you have to stop that pause we were talking about and going, I want to pause and get the tool set. So somebody has to raise their hand and saying, we need to stop and find the tool set, right? Second, it's finding the tool set. And third, it's in implementing the tool set and making it work. And fourth, is everybody on the team willing to change? Because if we're not willing to change, you can bring in any speaker you want, and they can speak anytime that they want. And you can just hear Charlie Brown, right? And just hear, and then we just hit the cycle button again. Like, we just go around again. Now, Phil, you bring a sense of calm and peace within yourselves and are willing to call it on you. You're willing to be the vulnerable one in the room, I'm assuming, and saying, hey, I messed up. You've said that before in here, with work and stuff. And not everybody's willing to do that. Not everybody's willing to say, I will step up and be the first person in the room to say, this is what I feel and how I see, and this is where I'd like to go. Is anybody with me or against me? But it's hard.
And I mean, that, and the vulnerability is one of the key foundations for this concept of psychological safety, which is creating that, that environment. But to get vulnerable, like, we're not, like, vulnerability didn't get, the practicing effective vulnerability wasn't the thing that got us into vet school.
Well, yeah. And then, like, on one hand, you got to have your coat of armor on, like you said. But on the other hand, I'm supposed to be vulnerable to my, so I can get help. It's just really hard to flip between those two. Yeah. So you end up, I think, a lot of times putting on your armor, and then you go home and, do what you got to do to try to get tuned up for the next round. and let me, when I say suit of armor, it's not a, coping mechanism necessarily. Is that's what I used to think, is I just go in here and I don't give a shit. I don't care what you think, like, whatever. That's not that's a different, coping mechanism. But to David's point, is that if we have an environment where we are intentional about viewing the what's going well, that is vitally important. It's not the only thing. It's not, I'm not talking toxic positivity, but the evidence shows us that when we do that, when we're intentional about creating positive emotions, is when the bad stuff does happen in veterinary medicine, which it's going to, because we're inherently a volatile and uncertain, profession. We don't know what's going to come in the door.
But those are the things that allow us, where if I'm getting hit stress wise and I'm up here and I'm constantly stressed, when the bad thing happens, I don't have any emotional capacity. That's when just something like that hits me, and it's, it's really, really overloads me. But if I'm in an event where, hey, like for instance, yesterday, one of the veterinarians that I work with, he did his first solo hind limb amputation. That's a big deal.
Wow.
That's a big
Yeah.
surgery.
That's-
Yeah. And I know the work that it took for him to do it. And I also know that he wasn't going to hold the trophy because it's just not his name. And we work on that. And we sat down at the end of the day and I said, "Will you do something for me?" I said, "You go out tonight, you tell Celeste, his girlfriend," I was like, "You tell her, hey, we're going out for a steak dinner, and you sit with this one tonight because you did a hell of a good thing today." And because the challenging stuff is going to happen, but if I sit with that and I can let that seep in, it helps us emotionally. So yeah.
Mhm.
Good for you to be aware and present with him and see this as a learning opportunity, teachable moment, and you did something with it. I mean, I think there's a lot of practice owners and leaders that never would have followed up with
Mhm.
that step that you took, Phil, and
Mhm.
made a difference to that doctor because you had the awareness to do that.
Mhm. And it just took a moment of your time.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a place on veterinary teams for a psychologist or a counselor of sorts? Like, I'm thinking in high school, you have a high school counselor there to help be available for the kids. But also, I'm thinking when I watch my all-time favorite show, NYPD Blue, you are required, if you're in a high frontline job, to go meet with someone regularly, and just, even though you don't necessarily want to, but you just go, and usually it seems like it's a good thing.
I had actually
Do you
had a
think there's
client.
a place for that in vet
Yeah,
med?
I had a client that they ran a large ER specialty center, and they hired a social worker, psychologist that worked full time in the practice that would sit down with clients. Hey, I see, you seem pretty serious, or kind of counseling one-on-one with clients, going through the stressful situation, following up with doctors, with team members. I mean, her job was to do exactly that. Now, it was a big staff, so there's a lot of interactions, and they, in talking with management, they perceived that it did help. I mean, it wasn't the right thing for everyone, but at what size does your practice become big enough that that's an expense that's appropriate? Or can you outsource that? Health insurances now do have these wellness lines and phone lines, but how many people take advantage of those? And how
Yeah,
many
so much effort.
practices
And
educate the team that it's there?
yeah.
Well, they
And,
don't
and
know
I think
it's there. Yeah.
well, I was just going to say it. So, this is, I get super excited. I mean, this is the stuff that, I get to be a part of. And so it's, yeah, I mean, I would say it's yes. And, is that having that there, so to everyone's point, is the utilization of it. One is that the leaders have to utilize the service.
Yeah.
The leaders don't utilize the service, the chances of that being successful, go down the toilet. And then from a recovery point of view, like when I look at, recovery, is that we have psychiatrists, we have psychologists, we have peer educated, support network. And I think that's the thing on an individual, team, and organizational level. And so that's why, yes to veterinary social workers, and yes to having peer educated people who are day to day, because again, to David's point, like we can't hire and I'm just throwing a number out there, we can't hire a 6-figure, mental health professional at a 20 employee, hospital. Like, I mean, we just can't do it. So we can outsource, and there are exciting things, I think, on the forefront for that. But if we do have some educated peers, and leaders that have some of this organizational well-being education and crafting what day-to-day looks like, those are all pieces of, this puzzle. So
Are you offering courses on that, Phil? Like, are
I
there
do.
online
Yeah.
courses there where
There
if
are
people are listening, they could
definitely.
start to get
Yep.
smarter here?
Yeah, in fact, we just did our inaugural. Well, we got to do a talk with Kelly about the Inspire program by FEMA. So Blue sponsored this, but we sponsored a group of 20 veterinary leaders to go through organizational well-being training, for veterinary workplaces. And so what the hope is that is a ripple effect, and we see that shown in human medicine. There was a white paper that was done when there are well-being champions in the hospital, and I'm throwing this number out, there's about a 15 to 20% improvement in the overall well-being, because you have somebody who's looking for the things. And it's not just because what we'll see is, let's all do a gratitude list. And it's like, yeah, I mean, gratitude's a great intervention, but gratitude's not going to do anything if we're seeing 45 patients, per doctor a day, and we have a 1-to-1 staff ratio. Like there are organizational things that need to be in place that, we just can't overcome. And I know I've said it before, but I jokingly say the Dalai Lama, would drop the F-bomb if he was, quadruple booked on a Friday with no technicians. All respect to his holiness. He would never say that, but just, like that, but that level is that individual resilience only goes so far.
Right.
It's really important, but it won't overcome structural and systemic issues in the workplace. And we need both. We need all of those. We need the individual, team and leadership, and organizational levels to all be working together. And yes, there are a lot of different, things that are out there, and anybody who wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to, talk about what we have and all the other options and where to go. It's just like, I love going down the rabbit hole of learning all that stuff. So, yeah.
I want to tell you guys about this Oura Ring I just got.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know all about it.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, it's just like almost like an Apple Watch, but it's a ring. And I have a few issues with the Apple Watch or the Fitbit. I don't like things on my wrist, for one thing, but also I don't like getting buzzed and dinged and ticked and interrupted all the time. It drives me nuts. And so I like this because it's only one way. It only reads and then reports to the phone. But I can also sleep with it, right? And then it's reading my data. It's getting used to me. After I've worn it about 3 months, it's getting more relevant to me and gives me helpful suggestions and things. But the thing I love the most is it gives you this daily readiness score, and it tells you what your level is for the day. Like, how equipped are you? What's your number rating for today when you start the day? And I only wish I would have had this when I was practicing, because the reason why is I think I would have had to face the fact that I was not doing as well as I thought I was. I would have had a glaring data to show me that I wasn't holding it all together as well as I thought I was. Because now looking back, I can see like, okay, you were sort of a hot mess there, like for a long time. You were tired, you were cranky, you were angry, you were overworked, but I didn't think that about myself back then. And I really like it. And I wish that all veterinary leaders could wear one and just kind of check themselves, because it's all about restoration and recovery and being ready for the day. And I think if you see you're not getting a great score, then you have some opportunity to face that, like with real data, to say, okay, I got to do something here. It's some awareness. I wonder if they should make team members wear this. I mean, I know that's probably a violation of personal involvement, but I thought, wow, if I was running a practice, I would tell everyone, I'll buy you a ring if you feel comfortable reporting to me your average weekly ready score, and we could work together to help you achieve whatever you need to be your best self in general.
And would you
idea.
be open to talking a little bit about the heart rate variability? And where, like, if you had a chunk of your day, let's say, and like what what was your stress response like? What was your
Oh,
sympathetic nervous
okay. So
system response like? Yeah.
this is so funny. So, I've tried really hard to like riding horses. My husband's big into horses. We have a lot of horses, and I mean, I want to be a cowgirl. I really want to. They're so cool. They can back up a trailer. They can ride a bucking horse. They're so amazing. So I've really tried to embrace being a cowgirl inside of me, unlock this. But the fact of the matter is, I get so stressed out on a horse, and I've tried to overcome it. And I finally had the realization, like, I don't love it. And I had to admit this. Well, a few weeks ago, Ellis goes, "Hey, why don't you come out to the arena and ride Pablito a little bit? He's such a nice horse. You can just walk him around a bit." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I go out there and I get on Pablito, and I literally sit on Pablito. Like, he's not even moving. I just sit there. And then I walk him around the arena 3 times total. And then I'm like, I'm going to get off. And later I pulled up my Oura app, and my heart rate was jacked so high during this little 15 minutes. Ellis was like, "Oh my God, you weren't kidding. You really stress out." And I said, "I really do." He goes, "I would have never noticed, like, looking at you externally, that you were having that emotion inside." And I'm like, I'm trying to hold it together, but my body is telling me otherwise. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it picked it up. I mean, I was just sitting there, my heart rate. You can see the spike on my my rhythm.
Yeah. It does matter. We had a client call, and it was a lot of communication stuff that had to be sorted out, because in marketing, you don't always work with the doctor owner, you work with the practice manager. And then every once in a while, the doctor owner will sail through, and I mean years once in a while, or months once in a while. So we had one of those catch-up moments, and we got done afterwards, and one of my staff people had a watch in this case, and the watch said afterwards, "Congratulations on your workout. Your heart rate stayed above a certain amount for over a half an hour." And she was just like, "Holy cow, that's how," because we were trying to find a positive communication, education, everything we believe in Beyond Indigo. And sometimes that takes a lot of work and a lot of stress. So her heart rate was through the roof after that. And we were just like chuckling, like we did here. But yeah.
Eye-opening, right? Because I thought, I was telling someone recently that I worked with a long time. I said, "Yeah, I'm really working on trying to be more go with the flow. I feel like I'm really uptight. I see now I'm really uptight about a lot of things. I'm really wired up." And I've always thought of myself as like, go with the flow. I love change. This is me. She goes, "My God, whatever gave you that idea about yourself?" I'm like, I think it's interesting, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we want to be. Sometimes it's hard to see who you really are. And I don't know. I also nerd. I like data to support these findings.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. Well, as we kind of wrap up today, we covered a lot of territory, and
as we do.
As we do. Yeah, we always do, because we're not
in our mission to just be better.
Stuff,
right?
And we support each other, talking about safe spaces and all that sort of thing. But we are also willing to be transparent. We're also willing to be caring. We're also willing to be vulnerable, so we can have these conversations with the greater world. But the bottom line is, being a human is messy, and it takes a lot of work, and you have to practice being human all the time. You have to practice communication all the time. You have to work on yourself all the time. I don't think you ever get to the end. I think it's a permanent journey. I suppose you do get to the end when you die, but we don't. Then what happens?
Until then, it's a work in progress.
Yeah. It's not to be so hard on yourself, but to keep working on yourself and being willing to work with each other and saying, "Hey, you have a minute, I mean, Stacy, you're really gentle and really good about that. And Phil, you are too. And David, you are too, about just, we just sit down and talk for a minute, like, or listening or being empathy about it. And realizing that's an everyday thing, not a once in a while thing. You know?
I
And
think that's such a great
cool.
summary, Kelly. It's an everyday thing, not a once in a while thing. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we forget because we think we have to be perfect or we have to have things just right. But like when you look back at your younger self, like you said, Stacy, or any of us in this room, we're like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
we thought we really had it together back then." But you know, looking from this version of me back to that version of me, I'm like, ooh, that was a little rough. The edges were a little rough. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
right. And our future selves are gonna look at this selves and go, ooh, that was a little rough. So
We hope,
give yourself
because
some
that
grace.
means we got better.
Doesn't mean we got better, right?
We
And
don't want to become old curmudgeons,
oh,
regress.
I hope not. I've seen some
Yeah.
pretty cool older people, and I want to grow up to be one of them, is what I've decided.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When we grow up.
Yeah, if we ever grow up. Who knows? It's a work in progress every day.
Exactly.
So thank you, everybody, for joining our musings today. We'd love to hear about your musings or stories or what would work for you all, because there is no one size fits all in this process. The one size that fits all is that you just keep trying every day. That's the one size that fits all. So until next time, we hope you all have a wonderful day and love the people and the animals around you and give yourself the biggest amount of love of all. So we will say adieu.